Dale Robertson appeared in 60 films and more than 430 television episodes, but he always called Oklahoma home.
Did you know that Dale Robertson turned down a TV role 4 times? That TV show would go on to be the one he's famously known for. From his love for horses to serving in the Army, mistakenly starting an acting career to finally returning to what he loved the most, Dale Robertson has done it all. However, things would go downhill towards the end of his life, when he least expected it, and the secrets his wife revealed will lead to a painful death. Early life. Before we move on to the sordid details and the secrets he harbored, let us first look at the life of Dale Robertson. Dale Robertson was born as Dale Lemoyne Robertson on July 14, 1923, to parents Melvin and Varvel Robertson in Harrah, Oklahoma, United States. Dale was the youngest of 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. His sister, Dorothy Lee, who was born on May 14, 1917, unfortunately passed away just less than a month after her first birthday on July 8, 1918. Dale did not get the opportunity to meet her as he was born 5 years after her death. His brother, Melvin Roscoe Jr., named after their father, was born on February 9, 1919, while Chester Howard, called Chet, was born on September 3, 1920. Dale's childhood life was unfortunately not a smooth one. His parents divorced in 1927 when he was only 4 years old, and Varvel left with her children, moving to Oklahoma City where she would take on different jobs to make ends meet. However, although her efforts were commendable, a family of 4, notably with 3 boys, needed more than she was able to scrape by with the work she could get. As a result of their financial constraints, the boys often walked around the neighborhood selling baked goods Varvel had made in a bid to help with their ugly situation. In an unfortunate turn of events, misfortune struck, pushing the family deeper into chaos. Dale woke up on a fateful night, screaming in pain and terror. The 13-year-old boy had gone blind and almost completely deaf, a situation that was not only difficult to explain, but also difficult to imagine. Although the family barely had enough to scrape by, Dale's mother and siblings did all they could to make sure that a solution could be offered to return him to his original state. For over a year, the family consulted many different doctors in a bid to find the solution to the sudden, unexplainable problem. However, the doctors, at a loss as to what had happened, could only speculate that Dale had caught an infection while taking a swim in a local creek. Stumped by their inability to find a reasonable cause and a viable solution for his sudden impairments, the disappointed family returned to their home and struggled to adjust to the fact that he would never see again. However, a miraculous turn of events would have him back on his feet, in what the family could only term a miracle, considering the lack of explanation for what had happened. His illness, which had appeared suddenly, disappeared in the same manner. Dale could once again see and hear, although it took a while to adjust to his new normal. The family was overjoyed with the sudden development. Finally cured, he returned to school, attending Roosevelt Junior High. However, he often spent a lot of time at the ranch where his father was a ranger. Dale had been riding from an early age, and at the age of 10, he was quite adept at it, besting so many with his skill and love for riding. However, training polo ponies was not the only thing he was good at. Dale had already begun a career in boxing while he was still a teenager. Although boxing was not his passion, it was one of the ways he could ensure that his family had enough to survive during the Depression, when everyone was struggling to make ends meet and things had become much harder than they already were since they moved to Oklahoma City after their parents' divorce. Although he was just a teenager, Dale fought professionally and won a vast number of his fights. Despite his victories, Dale was sometimes met with an opponent he couldn't easily win as a result. He was knocked out a few times, with one resulting in a broken nose. Despite the pain that shot through him, Dale continued fighting until another punch to his nose knocked it right back into place. For him, there was no chance of giving up. Not if he wanted to continue to remain relevant in boxing and earn money to help out his family. Life in the Army. Dale graduated from Casson High School in 1939 and attended Oklahoma Military College at Claremore. Although he had plans to continue with his boxing career immediately after he got his degree, however, his plans changed when in his second year at the military college, the Second World War began. Dale joined the military alongside his brothers and classmates, and they were quickly sent off for basic training to prepare them for the war. It was from there that Dale was sent to Officers Candidate School in Fort Knox, Kentucky, to become an officer. After his training, he was stationed at San Luis Obispo, California. During the Second World War, Dale served with Patton's Third Army and went ahead to win both the bronze and silver medals, having been wounded twice in service. He served in the Army in Africa and Europe, but would have his knee shattered by German mortar fire, an injury that put an end to his plans of returning to his career as a professional boxer. While he was still stationed in California, Dale would take a portrait of himself to send home to his mother, a request from her that he willingly honored. But Dale could never have imagined how a single portrait would change the trajectory of his life, setting him off in directions he never thought he would ever follow. Acting career. Dale's career in acting began in a way that he never could have expected. While he was still stationed at San Luis Obispo in California, Dale's mother would request him to have a portrait of himself sent to her. With the dread that loved ones often endured when soldiers were sent off into war, Varvel realized she did not have a portrait of her son and asked him to send her one. While they waited to be shipped off to war, Dale and his friends would go off to Los Angeles where he would have his portrait made. However, what he did not know at the time was that the photographer had placed a second copy of his photo in the shop window in hopes that it would attract others, soldiers and civilians alike, to have their pictures taken. Dale would not see the picture that had been taken of him until years later, however. A lot of agents, scouting for talents, would see it, and this was about to cause a huge stir. Scouts began to write to him asking to represent him as an actor. Dale would receive a lot of letters as a result. This was, however, not the first time that he had been propositioned to become an actor. While Dale was still a boxer, he had been approached by Columbia Pictures to be tested for the role of male lead in their film version of Golden Body. However, Robertson rejected their offer for a trip to Hollywood for a screen test, citing that he didn't want to leave the polo ponies he'd been training nor his home as the reason for his refusal. The role eventually went to William Holden. Dale's career would not begin until the war was over. Although he continued to receive letters from talent scouts, Dale continued on in the Army, leaving them at the back of his mind as he fought to defend those in need. Dale and the entire 97th Infantry Division was put on a troop train and sent to New York, where they were soon shipped off to France. Dale, who was a second lieutenant and had become an engineering officer assigned to the 322nd Combat Engineers, served as a tank commander in the 777th Tank Battalion in North Africa. Unfortunately, Dale was standing in the hatch of his tank when it was hit. He was blown out of the hatch, an ordeal which he fortunately survived, although he had taken several hits from shrapnel to his lower legs. Tragically, despite his injury, he would turn out to be the luckiest of them all, as he was the only one in his tank to survive. Dale returned to battle after he had recovered, although the weight of the loss he had just experienced would stick with him. Dale was stationed with the 322nd Combat Engineer Battalion in Europe. The war had already progressed extensively by the time they arrived in Europe, where they were sent to fix the bridges and roads in the Dusseldorf region of Germany and afterwards to Czechoslovakia to assist there. Unfortunately, Dale's earlier accident would not be the last time he would get hurt. Dale and his group fought to clear out the mines, however. While he was under fire, he was wounded once again. He stayed true to his determination that had constantly kept him going from his years as a child, and despite the pain that shot through him, Dale dressed up his wounds and continued into war. His effort was commendable, earning him bronze and silver medals. Years later, the Army would once again attempt to enlist Dale for war. However, his brush with death twice had not only left him battle scars that he would forever bear, but they had also rendered him unfit for deployment and battle. However, his bravery as he marched on into war would be one that continued to resonate in the minds of others. With the war finally over and Dale injured and unable to return to his boxing career as he had planned when he joined the military college, Dale chose instead to take a chance at acting. This was new territory for him, since he had never acted before, nor had he taken an interest in the career path. His only advice going forward had been from the Hollywood actor Will Rogers Jr., who told him to never take a dramatic lesson, as they would try to put your voice in a dinner jacket, and people like their hominy and grits in everyday clothes. Dale would avoid formal acting lessons after that advice, staying true to himself and acting out his purely based on his talents alone. However, despite his new interest in the entertainment industry, things would not come as easy as should have been expected, as the once eager scouts who wrote to represent him now turned him away. Weathered from war, Dale had become slightly different from the man he was when his portrait was pasted in the shop window, a difference that managed to put a pin on what should have been an easy debut into the acting industry. In 1948, Dale finally got his breakthrough after finally finding an agent who was willing to give him a chance. However, his first movie, The Boy with the Green Hair, where he acted as a cop, was uncredited. The next two movies he acted in Flamingo Road in 1948, where he acted as Tuna Sims, and The Girl from Jones Beach in 1949, which saw him as a lifeguard, would follow the same path with him remaining uncredited. However, Dale had a breakthrough when he starred in Fighting Man of the Plains in 1950, starring as Jesse James opposite Randolph Scott. Although Dale did not play a particularly major role, his acting would earn him praise and the recognition he needed in order to receive better roles. Dale not only earned praises from viewers, but also from the producer of the movie. And following the success of the movie, he was offered a 7-year contract by Fox Studios, which created an avenue for him to pursue his dreams of owning a ranch. In 1950, he starred in The Caribou Trail, and in 1951, Dale starred in another movie, Two Flags West, where he shared the screen with Joseph Cotten, Linda Darnell, and Jeff Sandler, further paving a path for himself in Hollywood. Dale was quickly becoming a popular face in the entertainment industry. He was cast in the musical Call Me Mister in 1951, where he played a support part. However, Dale soon starred in leading roles in films such as Take Care of My Little Girl, still in 1951, where he featured as Gene Crane's love interest. Golden Girl would also be filmed in the same year. It was a movie which was loosely based on the life of Lotta Crabtree, as the movie's retelling of historical events carried on as they saw fit. He would play Tom Richmond, while Mitzi Gaynor played the popular 19th century entertainer Lola Crabtree. Stardom. Dale's acting in Golden Girl would mark the beginning of his rise to fame. In 1952, Dale played the main character, Sam Crockett, in Return of the Texan, a Fox-produced movie, alongside Joanne Drew. Dale would star in more movies in the year 1952, such as The Outcasts of Poker Flat, where he would appear opposite Ann Baxter, and then Lydia Bailey, which was a historical adventure. Dale was one of the several signees under Fox Studios to appear in O. Henry's Full House in 1952. In 1953, he starred in the movie The Farmer Takes a Wife, playing Betty Grable's love interest. It was a collaboration that he appreciated, as Betty Grable was one of the few leading ladies that Dale truly enjoyed working with. Despite his popularity and the time spent on screen, Dale was not very cooperative with the press, preferring to be left alone to enjoy his privacy. Unfortunately, that would not come without managing to provoke certain big names who were not used to taking no for an answer. Dale's constant shunning of the press placed him in the bad books of the powerful columnist Luella Parsons. He would go on to win the press's Sour Apple Award for 3 years in a row. He later commented that he looked forward to receiving it for a 4th time. However, Sinatra would stand in the way of that, having punched a photographer in the nose after they disturbed him. In 1953, Dale would star in The Devil's Canyon with Virginia Mayo. He also starred in Son of Sinbad in the same year. although the movie would not be released until 2 years later. Dale returned to Fox for the movie City of Bad Men in 1953, with Crane and the Silver Whip in 1954, starring alongside Rory Calhoun and Robert Wagner. He would go ahead to star alongside Deborah Paget, a beloved and well-known actress, in The Gambler from Natchez, also in 1954. His constant lead roles would go on to cement him in Hollywood's golden era as a leading figure, a coveted spot for most actors and actresses. Dale's career in Hollywood had been filled with success. Dale could not have prepared himself for the trials and failures he would face in his personal life. Marriage and losses. In 1951, Dale found love in the person of Frederica Jacqueline Wilson. The two began a romance almost immediately and got married in the same year of 1951, marking a new chapter in their lives. A year after their marriage, Dale and Jacqueline welcomed their baby girl and the only child from their marriage, Rochelle. Rochelle was born in the middle of his sudden rise to stardom while he was signed to Fox Studios and during the production of O. Henry's Full House. However, their marriage would soon meet its end after 5 years together on June 4, 1956. After their divorce, Jacqueline gained custody of their daughter, Rochelle, as was the custom of the time. Interestingly, Dale, whose relationship had blossomed with Mary Murphy both on screen and off as he starred along her in Sitting Bull, went with her to Arizona on the very day his divorce was finalized, sparing no time with the woman he loved. The two had met on a flight to Mexico where Sitting Bull was being filmed. The filming, which had taken almost 2 months, had the two of them constantly together during production. It was during this time that a romance would develop between the co-stars. For the next 2 years, their relationship would become on and off as Dale battled with his slowly dying marriage. The two exchanged vows that same day in 1956, and at 32, Dale found himself once again a married man to Mary, who was only 25 at the time. Their union, however, was nothing short of tumultuous. Unfortunately, caught up in their romance, they had not discussed their desires as a couple going forward, and in the same year of their marriage, in 1956, Mary filed for an annulment 3 months later, citing Dale's reluctance to have children as the reason for their divorce, despite already having a daughter and later adopting another. Mary continued with her acting career after their annulment, and would eventually remarry and have a daughter of her own, satisfying her need to become a mother. She would pass away at the age of 80 on May 4, 2011 after succumbing to heart disease. His third wife, Lula May, 2 years into his work in The Tale of Wells Fargo. According to Lula May, she had been working at a Houston oil company as a switchboard operator at the time she met Dale. She and her friends had decided to enjoy a little time at the horse races, which was where she would see Dale. She had recognized him straight away, however, when Dale walked up to her to ask how she was doing. She had replied with a straightforward answer, "Awful." The next day, still on their vacation, Dale had walked up to her once again to ask how she was doing. However, she would respond to him with the same answer she had given the previous day. Intrigued by her, Dale had sent a message, inviting her and her 4 friends to visit his ranch in California. However, only 2 of the girls took him up on his offer. Lula May was one of them. The two would become closer over a period of time, and on the 13th of November 1959, Dale Robertson, now 36 years old, would be married for the 3rd time to 26-year-old Lula May in Robertson's Sepulveda Ranch in California. Much like Dale, this was not Lula May's first marriage, as she had been divorced from her first husband for 4 years at the time of her marriage to Dale. 2 years after his marriage to Lula May, Dale appeared on the Ralph Edwards show This Is Your Life as a surprise guest star with his wife Lula May and his adopted daughter Rebel Lee Robertson in 1961. The two would be married for a long time, enjoying the privacy of their marriage as a result of Dale's belief. However, Dale's career path constantly had him on the road, which meant they did not always spend enough time together as a married couple. However, the two managed to make their marriage work for almost 2 decades. On September 15, 1977, after 17 years of marriage, Dale and Lula May filed for the divorce. Lula May, who was 44 years at the time, cited irreconcilable differences as the reason for their separation. The two were officially divorced on February 8th. On the 12th of December, only 10 months after his third marriage ended, Dale would lose his brother, Chester Howard Robertson, popularly called Chet, at the age of 57. Within a few months of Chet's death, Dale moved to Oklahoma so that he could take over the ranch from where his brother stopped. Dale would meet his fourth and final wife in September 1979 when he flew from Oklahoma City to Los Angeles to attend an event. Susan Robbins was an airline stewardess at the time of their meeting. She would not only meet Dale, but also his daughter, Rochelle. The two arranged a dinner date on her next trip to Oklahoma, and their connection grew even stronger. Dale and Susan would begin a habit of flying back and forth to see each other. At the time of their meeting, Dale was 56 years old. Susan would also meet Dale's younger daughter, Rebel Lee, who was living with him on his ranch. On February 2, 1980, only 5 months after knowing each other, Dale and Susan married. The two went on to live at the Haymaker Farm, where Dale was already living out a semi-retirement since taking the overseeing of the farm after the death of his brother. Dale's father, Melvin Roscoe Robertson, passed away in May 22, 1980, at the age of 86, in his home only 3 months after Dale married Susan. A year after the death of his father on May 27, 1981, Dale was about to experience another loss that would shake him to his core. Dale had been waiting to have lunch with his mother at the Sleepy Hollow restaurant, who was being driven to the restaurant by her great-nephew. However, Dale could never have known that he would not be meeting her ever again. As the car turned off into the parking lot of the restaurant, her car was hit by a vehicle. Unfortunately, Susan, who had been on her way to the restaurant with some of her friends to meet with her mother-in-law, witnessed the incident in shock. Recognizing who the car belonged to and what it meant for Dale, she rushed to Dale's mother. However, it was too late. The older woman had died on impact. At a loss, she ran into the restaurant to notify her husband of what had happened and offer him relief from his sorrows. Varvel Rowena Robertson had been 84 years old when she died, robbing Dale of another important person in his life. Tales of Wells Fargo. In 1956, despite his annulment and divorce from both wives, Dale continued on with his acting career, not allowing the weight of his unsuccessful unions to keep him down and away from the spotlight. He starred in The Dakota Incident in 1956 alongside Linda Darnell. The movie was about survival as the passengers band together on a stagecoach to fight off attacks from Indians. During the production of the movie, Dale was being called by producer Nat Holt, who wanted him to star in a series he was producing. However, Dale would refuse him. The persistent producer continued to call Dale, convincing him that he was the perfect person for the role. However, Dale would constantly refuse the row a total of 4 times. Holt's persistence would soon pay off. On the 5th time, he agreed to star in the series, although he would claim that the only reason he agreed was because he felt he owed him a favor, since he had been the one to hire him for his first 2 credited films that played a part in his launch to stardom. That movie was Tales of Wells Fargo. Nat Holt had propositioned Dale an offer of 50% of the show if he would agree to become Jim Hardy, an agent for Wells Fargo who investigated crime against the county. Dale was ambidextrous, although he mostly used his right hand. However, in a bid to add a different element to the show from all the others in the genre, Dale decided that his character, Jim Hardy, would be a left-hand draw, his ability to use both hands playing a major part in the show that did not go unnoticed by viewers. In the movie, he would shake the hands of outlaws with his right hand and draw out his gun with his left hand. Although Dale had not thought much of the production at the beginning, his constant refusal a testament of that fact. To everyone's surprise, it became a major TV show loved by many and calling for more seasons than had been intended by the producer. It would prove to be one of his most successful appearances in the span of his career. Even now, over 50 years after its production and with the production of other notable films, Tales of Wells Fargo continues to amaze those who watch it with the wonderful acting from its cast and well-crafted storyline. The show ran for a period of 5 years. Dale's character's play at being ambidextrous was not the only difference to the show that viewers noticed. In the show, every character had a favorite horse, and Jim Hardy's was named Jubilee. Dale had found Jubilee at the racetracks, a beautiful horse with a diamond glaze and 4 stockinged feet all the way up to his knees. The horse stood 15 hands high. Jubilee happened to be from the line of the famous racehorse, Man of War. Dale's acting followed the style of one of his favorite actors, John Wayne. Following after his acting style was the closest thing to acting lessons that Dale received, stating that an actor becomes the part that he's playing. I am a personality. A personality adapts the part to himself and not himself to the part. His time in the Army had taught Dale strength and skill, a life lesson that would carry on into his movies. Throughout his career, Dale performed his own stunts instead of carrying on with a stuntman. This would earn him an induction into the Stuntman's Hall of Fame 20 years later, a nomination that came as a surprise considering he was not professionally a stuntman. Dale also did the narration for Tales of Wells Fargo. Although Dale had gained even more recognition from the Tales of Wells Fargo and everyone loved to see him appear on screen, after 4 years on the TV show, the producers of the show began to change things up, adding new characters to the show. Unfortunately, this would not sit well with the retired main character Jim Hardy, who had been moved to a ranch in California and was seldom shown in the show as investigating a crime. His role in the show had gone from the most important character to a burned-out and retired character often appearing only a few times. In 1962, a displeased Dale would sell his part of the show to the producers. Dale's impact on the show had turned out to be even more than the producers anticipated. After he left, the show was quickly canceled on June 2nd of 1962. Although Dale's success in Tales of Wells Fargo was widely known, he was notable in other works as well, creating a name for himself that would not be soon forgotten in a hurry. Other notable work. In 1963, Dale's brother Chet began managing Dale's Haymaker Farm, which was outside of Yukon, Arizona, about 17 miles northwest of Oklahoma City. The ranch had gotten its name Haymaker as a result of Dale's time in boxing that still stuck with him many years after he had bowed out of the profession. Dale raised quarter horses on his ranch, however. He frowned upon being labeled as a cowboy, stating that he raised horses and not cows. Dale took great pride in his knowledge of horses and showed it in his collection of thoroughbred horses. Dale would appear in many B-westerns and even starred in a British-made movie, Coast of Skeletons, in 1964 as a U.S. tycoon whose African diamond operation was being investigated by Richard Todd. Dale would appear on other TV series as a guest on Love Boat, Murder, She Wrote, Dallas and Dynasty, while he lived at his ranch in Oklahoma in semi-retirement. In 1964, Dale starred in Law of the Lawless alongside Yvonne DiCarlo. In the movie, a gunfighter who becomes a judge sentences a man to death, however. The man would turn out to be the son of an old friend, bringing trouble to him. In 1966, Dale would star in another series, Iron Horse, a gambler turned railway baron. In the series, which lasted until 1968, Dale won a half-finished railroad in a card game. However, when he attempts to finish the railroad, he was met with several obstacles. The series, which ended in January 6, 1968, boasted 47 episodes. In 1969, only a year after Iron Horse ended, Dale was hired to be host a TV show titled Death Valley Days. The first host before him was Stanley Andrews, who famously referred to himself as the Old Ranger. He held the position of host from 1952 to 1964. Between 1964 to 1966, the post would be held by the future governor and president Ronald Reagan, who had to quit the series to run for governor. After Reagan, the show was held by Rosemary DeKemp. However, she held it for only a short period of time before Dale was handed the role of host. The show would air the next year in 1970. Dale, who had moved to his ranch at the time, constantly traveled from California to Oklahoma to work. In 1974, Dale starred as Melvin Purvis G-Man in a made-for-television movie, Fictitious, a real FBI agent chasing down gangster Machine Gun Kelly. Dale would play the agent again in a spin-off the following year in 1975, which would be named the Kansas City Massacre. In 1977, Dale would be the first Oklahoman to be inducted into the Oklahoma Motion Picture Hall of Fame. When asked why he was the first to be inducted by the reporters, Dale jokingly said, "I don't know, and I'm not going to ask, or they might change their mind." In the same year of 1977, Dale starred in The Last Ride of the Dalton. In 1981, Dale appeared in 15 episodes TV show, Dynasty. Dale's character was killed off after the first season, which he blamed on his inability to keep his mouth shut, as he had been complaining about all of the sex stuff they put in. Dale had always been against using bad language around ladies and children, wanting to keep his movies family-friendly for everyone, maintaining his gentlemanly attitude. While Dale's prestigious career and gentlemanly behavior kept him in the hearts and minds of everyone, Dale's heart laid elsewhere, far from the silver screens and the prying eyes of the media. Horses and Final Days. Following the contract with Fox Studios, Dale purchased a land spanning across 436.8 acres in Oklahoma's rolling Canadian River Basin, where he would begin building his dream ranch. The ranch would become known as the Haymaker Farm. Dale, who, despite his acting, had continued with his love for horses, especially thoroughbred, wanted his horse ranch to be extremely popular and would begin breeding quarter horses. The Haymaker Farm was Dale's pride, breeding horses from outstanding breeding stock that would become world champions, setting records in horse racing. The name Haymaker describes a type of boxing punch that comes out of nowhere, stunning its recipient, and that was perfect for a man with many talents, relentless determination, stars and Purple Hearts from his bravery in the Army, and numerous boxing wins under his belt. Dale's brother Chet would oversee the management of the farm while Dale's acting career kept him on the road, too busy to take care of the horses he loved so much. It was an arrangement that worked until the time of his passing in 1977. Dale's horses, Highdale, Nugget Hug, Wingo Boy, Three Tears, Rebel Cause, Doll Up, and many others were trained to become champion horses, amongst others. However, Dale's favorite horse, Jubilee, would star in the series, Tales of Wells Fargo, alongside him. It was his prized possession, a horse he had purchased at the Hollywood racetrack, and stood tall and magnificent, with diamond shape in between his eyes and long white stripe on his coat, running down to his nose. Other than his appearance in the movie, Jubilee appeared in countless state fairs and rodeos over the years, a magnificent horse that proved himself to be worthy of the attention it commanded. Later, Dale would be inducted into the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, and in 2001 his portrait would be hung in the museum alongside the likes of Ben Johnson and John Wayne. In his later days after his retirement, Dale would return to his farm life, away from the television screen, and spend the rest of his life there with his wife, Susan Robertson. Dale Lemoyne. Robertson died at the age of 89 of lung cancer in 2013, free of regrets about retiring from a life of stardom to spend his last days doing what he loved, as he believed he was better with horses than movies. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one.